Good afternoon, good people. Good afternoon. Today, I really wanted to talk about The Woman King. My family and I, we saw this movie yesterday. We didn't do too much research on it. We didn't do any research on where the movie took place, if it's fact or fiction, um, any of the history of the Dahomey tribe or the Dahomey kingdom or empire, however you want to frame it. We didn't do any history, any research on it at all. We just simply went to go watch the movie. As my wife and I was watching this movie, and my son, there was a lot of things portrayed in the movie that, from the knowledge that we do have about our African part of history, that just wasn't lining up. Now, there were certain parts in the movie, especially this one character that was part or seemed to be part of the LGBT community. And I don't know why they put that imagery in the movie during that time. We understand that Africans at that time potentially didn't have that mindset. And they did have that mindset that probably came from the European nations that was coming over there because of the slave trade. But nonetheless, they had somebody that seemed to be part of the LGBT community. I don't know why they put that on the forefront. He only had a couple of parts, but nonetheless, you can kind of just tell it was a matter of symbolism. But I digress. Some of the questions that you guys may have is, was the movie good? From a non-historical perspective, the movie had some really good parts of action, different challenges of what a female may go through trying to be a warrior with the Dahomey. You've seen some people very arrogant, but came over their arrogance to be one of the greatest warriors, essentially, or part of one of the greatest female warrior empires. You can kind of see all that trial and tribulation of someone going through hardship, then turning out being the best. You're going to see that. So is there good action in the movie? Yes. Should you boycott the movie? That's dependent upon you. I saw it. The film was directed as a high quality film, so it didn't seem low budget at all. What else you may ask? Historically, this is a fiction movie that has some truths inside of it, and that is to really confuse the viewer, especially if you don't understand how Black Americans, Foundation Black Americans, essentially a small portion of us came to this land. Around 3 or 4% came to this land by the way of the slave trade. Now, the Dahomey Empire, the location is in the Benin, West Africa, Benin, Benin, near the Togo borderline, the Dahomey Empire. And the royal guards, or the most elite warriors, were the Ogoji, the female warriors. This is historically accurate. So when you look at the movie, that is historically accurate. But they did have male soldiers as well. Is that the female soldiers were mostly part of the king's guard, the king's specialized warriors, kind of like if you're watching the old Game of Thrones with the House of Dragons, how the kings and queens had their own special guard versus the foot troops. So essentially, the Ogoji, the female warriors, were the king's guard versus the regular foot soldiers were the male soldiers, essentially. But the king was a male at the time. Now, first and foremost, I think it's disrespectful 100% that they name the movie The Woman King. I was trying to really research historically where some of these inaccuracies kind of added up to be the truth. Meaning, I know we try to dramatize things to get people more engaged, so you can get viewership up, so you can make more movies and highlight more Black, actors and actresses, so on and so forth. But the term woman king, king in general, because if you know historically in Africa, they name people chiefs. Okay, they name people chiefs, but why name the woman the king versus the queen? Because we know in Europe, they had queens who ruled, right? Just like Queen Elizabeth II, she was, she's Elizabeth II, so she was the first of her name, all that bullshit, right? The second of her name, and she was in rule by herself. So she didn't need a man to validate her position as being the Queen of England. Now, as far as my generations and generations before me, the only thing we ever knew that was in Europe at the time, especially dealing with the UK and England, was the Queen. Now, this is a new age where there's a king once again of England. So essentially, at this time, she was named the woman king versus the queen of the Ogoji, queen of the Dahomey, but wasn't his wife. She was a warrior king, essentially. So even the title of the movie is fictional, confusing, and kind of just don't wrap your mind around it. Okay, don't wrap your mind around it. You just get very confused about the woman king because she wasn't his wife and she wasn't the king of the Dahomey Empire. I believe the guy's name, excuse me if I butcher these names, they are in a different language, Hangbi or Hungbi, or I know it's spelled like Hangbe, something like that. But nonetheless, the whole title is fictional. Okay, so don't get wrapped up around if the movie is fiction or nonfiction. It's definitely fictional. Okay, now some of the historical references in the movie are nonfiction. They are true. They're very truthful. The Dahomey Empire did have female warrior soldiers. Now, before we get too deep into this, I want to just show a clip here. So I'm gonna go fair use on this one. And for you guys, and this is not to spoil it, this is just a trailer. I'm not trying to spoil a movie. You haven't seen it yet. And some of you may be even boycotting the movie. And again, that's your own personal choice, okay?
That threatens our kingdom, our freedom. But we have a weapon they are not prepared for.
My king, the Europeans wish to conquer us. They will not stop until the whole of Africa is theirs. We must fight back.
Now let me stop right here. When I look at the palace compared to when we look at these Viking movies, we look at these English movies of all the armor and stone brick walls that they had in Europe and how they had all these castles. And then you look at this, you see a bunch of mud walls, you see hay as roofs. Everything is kind of like made out of wood, but even the Ugandans had stone walls around some of their castles. And the first castles ever recorded in history was in Africa. So again, there's so many inaccuracies in this movie historically about some of our ancestors and how they operated and organized, their kingdoms and empires. It was just mind blowing to me because when I look at, just take for instance, because that's the hot thing going on right now, the Game of Thrones. You see all these vast castles and stonework, and they're mountains high, these very, very large castles and kingdoms. And then you look at one of the most influential, powerful empires of its time, right? Dealing with here, the 17th, 18th, 19th century. I think the Dahomey Empire ended around in 1904, if my history serves me correctly. But nonetheless, look how they're displaying how we were living. And this is supposed to be a palace. It's crazy to me, family. It kind of just showed you that imagery is so powerful that this is how we were living. Yeah, they showed that our garments were beautiful. They showed the female warriors could fight excellently. Yeah, but look, they do a lot of this hidden imagery and perception to show you that your kingdoms and palaces are not more beautiful and fortified as the ones in Europe. I want to break this movie down because a lot of people are not going to be talking about the things I'll be talking about here today because you're just going to watch a movie, but I'm looking at the symbolism of it all. And we're the first civilization. We come from people who built the pyramids, as they would tell you, probably the Arabs or Arabic or even white people built or aliens built the pyramids. No, African people built the pyramids. If you look at history about stonework, even building stonework without mortar, how they even laid the rocks, it was stronger than walls that they had in Europe that actually used mortar to conjoin and bind the bricks together. So there's so many fiction, nonfiction, symbolism, and inaccuracies in this movie. The total movie to me is just straight fiction, first and foremost, but not some of the historical references that we may go over here today. Let me move on. Let me show you a little bit more of this clip here.
Jeska, you're asking me to take them to war. War.
Some things are worth fighting for.
Don't know, take my power, I go up. Don't know, take.
Now, right there, family, you see what it said. It said based on true events, not based on a true story, not based on true historical times, based on true events. That means that some of the things in the movie were true, as I just stated.
You are called to join the King's Guard. No kingdom in all of Africa shares this privilege. Train hard, fight harder. We fear no one. And we fear no pain. I offer you a choice. Fight or...
I want to pause it right there too. That was some sort of event that the female warriors of the Agoji and the male warriors of the Dahomey, which is still part of the same empire, was doing a competition of physical and mental prowess, right? They have a two-bladed and sharply edged spear that they both put in their chests, and they're both walking towards each other, and it's piercing their upper part of their pectoral muscle as they're walking forward. They're displaying the masculinity of a man, stating that a woman is stronger than a man. And I'm not stating that women are not, but we know, family, X and Y chromosomes, DNA, RNA, historically, men are naturally stronger than women. Now, I know some women are going to say, well, women are designed to handle or can endure more pain than a man. So that's even an argumentative point as well. But this having that one little clip, that one little scene, try to solidify why the Agoji female warriors were the royal guards of the king and specialized warriors like I don't know, like special forces or like the Rangers or like Navy SEALs or the Spetsnaz, whatever you want to look at them. They were the specialized soldiers of the king and the greatest warriors of their time. But again, that one, they didn't even have to have that clip in there. I'm just looking at the imagery, family, that they show that the females were stronger and can endure more pain than the male soldiers. Again, this is my perspective and conjecture. Please comment in the chat.
we die.
Ready for war, where you going?
To be a warrior, you must kill your tears.
We are the spear of victory! We are the blade of freedom! We are Dahomey!
Don't know, take my power.
Now, like I said before,
Don't know.
this picture has a lot of perception about, once again, Black females being very strong. And I'm not saying that our women are not. But then again, it also shows how some Black men are weak. It does. That's what you're essentially going to get from this show right here. But let me also point out some of the disrespect that the movie also displayed with some of the characters, with some of the actors and actresses in the movie. Let me show you this, family. This is, again, bear with me, bite your tongue, because I'm just showing you my conjecture here. Now, Viola Davis, beautiful Black American sister, she was the leading actress with, and I'm gonna butcher these people's name, Deso Membudu, okay, or Mebedi. I have no idea, but this lady right here, which is she's a South African actress. She's from South Africa. Because the Dahomey Empire geographically was in the modern day Benin, which is West Africa, also near Togo. They're probably almost a blended empire with Togo and Benin combined together. None of the major actors and actresses are from Benin or Togo. Let's go down the line here. Lashana Lynch, I believe she is English. She's a British. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, she's British. This guy right here, where is he from? I thought he was American at one point in time. He is also English, okay? This movie has a lot of English actors in it. So you have Lashana Lynch, English. John Boyega, English. I'm just going to call her Thuso. She's South African. Sheila Atim, she is Ugandan British. Jamie Lawson, where's she from? Jamie Lawson, guess where she's from? She's American. Okay, is she American? Let me make sure. I believe she's American. I could be wrong. Julia Oscar, or she's English. Jordan Bulger, he is actually English as well. So a lot of the major actresses were English. And the leading actress, which is Viola Davis, is American. So this is a big smack in the face of the people of Benin and Togo. You can get one of the top 5 actors or actresses actually to be from the country in which they're talking about, the Dahomey Empire, the Dahomey Kingdom. So that's a huge fallacy, even to have these actors. Now, a lot of us, FBA, we know that English actors have been taking our roles. One of the most famous has been, what's the guy's name? Idris Elba, which we kind of fell in love with Wired, and we come to find out he's an English actor because none of us really did our research. He played the role so excellently. But again, if I'm originally from Benin or Togo, this would be a big smack in my face that you couldn't find one actress in one of these leading roles that had a small part to be from my country. So that should be a big smack in the face for them. Oh yeah, I'm gonna be all over the map today, family. I'm going back and forth. It's gonna be huge contradictions, but this needs to be laid out, because don't go into this movie thinking that this movie is nonfiction. This movie is, I don't want to throw out a number. It's a lot of fiction in this movie. As they said before, there's some true events. The imagery and perception of the Dahomey female warriors is true. Okay, they had female warriors. We got that. Let me move on. Now, this was a journalist that wrote about this white woman here, Kate Erbland. I want to read some of what she said here. Very important to put things into perspective. Okay. And again, just like always, I want you guys to kind of read with me. I hate reading to folks, but nonetheless, I'm going to jump down here to the juicy part. It says, over the films, and I'm right here, family, over the film's perceived inaccuracies appear to be stoked by the film's marketing, which center it as predominantly focusing on the all-female warrior army, the Agoji, plus recent articles that purport to share the real history of the kingdom. It says, which dives into their story of how some African nations including Dahomey, were guilty of participating in the slave trade, with European invaders offering their own countrymen in exchange for material goods. Okay. It goes on to say, but while those historical notions are true, they also don't reflect the content of Prince by the Woods film itself, which does not shy away from the link between the Kingdom of Dahomey and the repugnant slave trade. In fact, much of the film, written by Dana Stevens and Mario Bello, follows the exact storyline, with Davis regarding General I'm just going to call her Nana Skinner, attempted to sway her king, John Boyega, to abandon the slave trade because of its horrific impact on their fellow countrymen. It is not just mentioned in the film, it's a large portion of the drama of his story. But when people boycott a film, presumably without seeing it first, the message is lost. She said, I learned early on you cannot win an argument on Twitter, Prince by the Wood told IndieWire during a recent interview. And I know all of that is going to go away once they see the film. There's an assumption we're not dealing with it, and we are dealing with it. So I have to live in the confidence they're going to see the film, they're going to see it. Now, first and foremost, family, we have to look at this film with a side eye. The other empire that's represented in the film is the Oyo, okay? And the Oyo, Dahomey, they have been battling for however long. But during this time, this is when the slave trade was in full effect. You had the Dutch, the Portuguese, and also the British. And they were trading large amounts of slaves. The Oyo was trading supposedly the Dahomey captured warriors into slavery. And they also, the Dahomey was capturing the Oyo warriors and selling them into slavery. And supposedly the woman king was trying to convince the king of the Dahomey kingdom to stop the slave trade and start to sell palm oil and some other natural resources that they had in their fields. Now, reading a lot of historical documents, that's a huge inaccuracy. The Dahomey or Goji female warriors wasn't directly involved in politics. It was not trying to stop the slave trade. They were trying to give away their enemies. They were trying to not only enslave their enemies to work in their fields of the palm oil, but also selling them off to for trade for weapons, guns, metals, and all other sorts of weaponry to beat out the Oyo. Okay, it's just family. I'm gonna try to get to this video, but it's very confusing if you don't research this history for yourself. You're going to think that there was an empire in these West African countries, Ghana and Benin and Togo and Nigeria, that some of these warring empires were actually trying to stop the slave trade. They wasn't. As it states here, family, it says Nanaska is a fierce warrior and impressive leader, but she's grown tired of violence, or at least of the things that make it feel necessary, like slavery. Okay. More than anything, she wants King Gizo to see the possibility of a Dahomey that does not need to engage in the slave trade. Yes, they sell to the white man. No, the woman king does not turn away from the part of history to be preposterous that it does not sell any black body to get ahead. I really wish that the conversation could happen around the film as opposed to around the anticipation of the film, because I think that we did not hesitate to investigate those areas. It goes on to say, the fact is that slavery is driven by material gain. It offered up people on this continent an option to make money that shouldn't have been offered up or forced upon them. And once it was, it created all sorts of internal conflict. And we don't hesitate in visiting that within the film. She added, I'm a big believer that information is power. And I think that understanding issues surrounding slavery from the standpoint of the African perspective is relevant. We look at it most of the time from what happened once those people were enslaved and were actually landing here in America versus what was going on the other side. Now, a lot of things were going on at the time that this film was actually being filmed. Now, first and foremost, we know historically that these countries in West Africa sold a lot of our ancestors into slavery and now what we call ourselves foundational Black Americans. Now, because of the wars, because of the battles that they have, that's why I believe that a lot of foundational Black Americans are part of these warrior tribes. And that's why we always revolt and fight back against the power that try to oppress us, even in the country that we live in today. But one thing that they didn't point out in this film, because a lot of us, we just thought it's going to be about a female warrior tribe fighting against another African tribe, and that was going to be it. But they threw the slave trade in there. They threw all sorts of other historical reference points, trying to really take the pressure off Europeans, taking pressure off the Portuguese, taking pressure off the French, taking pressure off the British. Basically stating that some people may believe that 100% that every African slave was sold into slavery by their own people. They're not going to display how a lot of Africans were actually stolen. A lot of Africans were overthrown, and now Europeans were in charge of their economies and actually sold people as property. They're not going to get into all of that because that is not the premise of the film. The premise of the film is to dilute the concentration that Europeans had in the slave trade. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, it's going to get ugly, family. Now we're going to read a few excerpts here from Google. Give me 1 second. Now it says here, Dahomey became adversarial to the British Empire. Listen to this. This is very important, family. This is probably one of the most important things that you'll read here today. Dahomey became adversarial to the British Empire after the abolishment of slavery during the 19th century. The British sent diplomatic missions to Dahomey in the effort to convince King Gizo to abolish human sacrifice and slave trading. What are you getting from that? Are you getting that the British, who was once part and a major component of the slave trade around the world, that's why you see all these Caribbean countries, these Caribbean nations speak English, because not only did they enslave their people, but they colonized them as well. But you know what? We realized in 1833. Now, this film was taken supposedly during the time of 1823. The British abolished slavery supposedly in 1833 and was trying to convince one of the major slave traders, the Dahomey Kingdom, to stop selling slaves. Hey, you know what? We realized we made a lot of money here in Europe. We raped the people that you gave to us. We killed them. We made them work effortlessly until their last dying day. But we realized these things were wrong. And now we want you to stop the slave trade. Yeah. But what do you get from it? Again, it states here that Dahomey became an adversary to the British Empire after the abolition of slavery during the 19th century, meaning that the Dahomey wanted to continue to sell slaves into slavery, sell their own people as well as their opposing foe in armies into slavery. That's what they wanted to do. That's what they're stating here. Let me move on. It also says, why did Dahomey sell slaves? Dahomey was organized for war, not only to expand the boundary, but also to take captives as slaves. Slaves were either sold to the Europeans in exchange for weapons or kept to work the royal plantation that supplied food for the army and the court. Now, the first reference was from Wikipedia. This reference is actually from the Britannica.com. I wonder where the Britannica.com originated from. Sounds like an English name, does it not? Let me move on. Family. There's so much going on right here. Let me go down here. Dahomey Kingdom became known to European traders at this time as a major source of slaves in the slave trade. became a major source. Now, this is coming from blackhistorymonth.org, .uk. The only reason why I want to make reference to all of these sites, because a lot of this deception, and I'm not stating African tribes, because a lot of African countries today came out and said, you know, we apologize for selling Black Americans into slavery and all the slaves in the Caribbeans that made up these different colonies that the UK, and again, family, this is just not the British, okay? It was the French as well, because, and matter of fact, after this whole slave trade has ended, the French went over and conquered the Dahomey. Yeah. The same people that you was in business dealing with of selling your own people, and also the people within your region, and you know, nearby countrymen and countries that border your country that you may have and may have not been in war with, and you sold them into slavery. Yeah, the same people came over and conquered you, and then started to sell the same people that were putting people into slavery and made you guys slaves, and also colonize your country. And that's why countries like that, Senegal, Togo, Benin, speaks French. Okay, but let me read this a little bit of this, family. Stay with me. The foundational king of the Kingdom of Dahomey is often considered, I'm just going to go Bada, who built the royal palace of Dahomey and began raiding and taking over towns outside the Dahomey plateau. At the same time, the slave trade began increasing in size in the coastal region through the kingdom, and trade with the Portuguese, the Dutch, and the British. The Dahomey kingdom became known to the European traders at this time as a major source of slaves in the slave trade. It goes on to say that King Agaja, grandson of Bada, came to the throne in 1718 and began significant expansion of the Kingdom of Dahomey. By 1720, King Agaja repudiated the kingdom's allegiance to Alada and began increasing military activity through the region. Let me scroll down. It says Agaja took over the city of Wada and thus became the primary force on a major part of the coastal. In 1729, Agaja began war against the Oyo Empire with a number of cross-border raids. During the war, the royal family of Wada returned to the throne, forcing Agaja to fight to reclaim the city. He moved much of his army with a significant portion in the back composed of women dressed like male warriors. This is possibly the beginning of the Dahomey Amazons, or the Dahomey warriors, okay? Man, it goes on, and it's a regional power to 1740 to 1852. We're going to go down here to suppression of the slave trade. Two major changes occurred in 1840 and 1850, which significantly altered politics in Dahomey. First, the British, who had been a major purchaser, again, the British, who became a major purchaser of slaves, began taking an active stance and abolishing the slave trade in the 1830s. They sent multiple diplomatic parties to Gizo to try and convince him to end Dahomey's participation in the trade. All of these were rebuffed by Gizo, worried of the political consequences of ending such trade. Second, the city of Abukara was founded in 1825 and rose to prominence as a safe haven for people to be safe from slave trades by Dahomey. In 1844, Dahomey and Abukara went to a war, and Abukara was victorious. Other violence in the early 1850s further cemented Abukara's challenge to Dahomey's economic control in the regions. What is that telling you already, family? That the depictions in the movie are 100% false when it comes to the Dahomey trying to essentially convince the king to stop the slave trade. And they had the king to think as though, you know what, I'm going to think about this. I'm really going to consider this. Then he made Ananeska, who was the woman king, he appointed her the woman king, thus solidifying that the Dahomey would end the slave trade. I hate to tell you, family, and I don't know if this is false or true, that all of the historical references that I found stated, one, that the British was the major slave purchasers, two, that the same people who started the fire tried to put out the fire. It also states that the British tried to end the slave trade and tried to convince Dahomey to stop selling people. That's not what the movie showed you. See, for a long time, we just thought that the Ashanti and some neighboring empires of the Ashanti, and that's Ghana, was selling our people into slaves, and that was it. And that we didn't even hear about the Dahomey, that they were at one point in time the major kingdom selling their own people into slavery. And when I mean people, I mean African people, because I don't really think they were selling the Dahomey people into slavery, but the neighboring and warring tribes and kingdoms that were around them at the time, but nonetheless selling their own people into slavery. Because of weapons. Because during this time, this king was trying to conquer every land. And in order to expand your kingdom, you need resources. They probably wasn't making swords. And at the time, as far as we know, the Europeans mixed in with the Chinese were the only one with muskets and guns and weapons of that sort. Yeah, we had blades and knives because they were making them out of rocks and other materials that they had there in Africa. I really want you to think about, if you go see this movie, if you've seen this movie, have you really looked at it like this before? You actually want to go back and say, hold up, what the hell is actually going on here? Because first and foremost, family, I'm just going to be real with you. I've heard about female warriors. I heard about female soldiers. I didn't know what country or what region, what empire, what kingdom they originally came from. But come to find out, once you do the history, that this was one of the major components of selling people into slavery, and every historical reference that you read backs up the story that the Dahomey kingdom and empire was one of the major sellers of slaves during that time. Let me continue. Internally, the pressure resulted in a number of changes. Gizo rejected British requests. Can I highlight that, family? Can I highlight that? Because if you see the movie, you're gonna believe that they ended it. No. Gizo rejected the British request for ending the slave trade, but at the same time began expanding significantly the palm oil trade as an economic alternative. Politically, the debate became centered in two political factions: the elephant and the fly. The elephant connected with Gizo high-profile political leaders, and the Creole slave traders like the family of De Sosa pushed for continued activity in the slave trade and was resistant to British pressure. The fly faction, in contrast, was a loose collection of palm oil producers and some chieftains which supported accommodation with the Bukado and the British in order to expand palm oil trade. At the policy and war debates held at the annual custom, these two factions held a number of tense discussions about the future of the Kingdom of Dahomey. In 1851 to 1852, the British imposed a naval blockade on the ports of Dahomey in order to force them to end the slave trade. To end the slave trade. And this information, once again, family, is coming from blackhistorymonth.org.uk. Take that with a grain of salt. In the same year and the following one, Gizo suspended large-scale military campaigns and human sacrifice in the kingdom, because that's one of the two things that the British wanted them to do. They wanted them to stop doing human sacrifice and slave trading. It says, however, political pressures contributed to the resumption of slave trading and large-scale military action in 1857 and 1858. Gizo was assassinated by a sniper associated with the Bukado, and large-scale warfare between the two states resumed in 1864. The one ended again in the favor of Bukado, and the result was that the slave trade could not be significantly reestablished to its 1850 level. The power of slave traders in the empire decreased, and the palm oil trade became a more significant part of the economy. So basically, this tribe right here are the ones who actually stopped Dahomey from selling our people into slavery for this region. Now, I'm probably butchering the name, the Bukado, Bukuda. I don't know. I'm just going over the Bukado. Okay, I know Phonetically, that doesn't sound like it, but I'm just going to go with that. It's easy off the tongue. So essentially, they're the one who conquered Dahomey to a point where they could not reestablish the slave trade. Not that Dahomey ended the slave trade on their own. As we stated before, those two factions, the elephant faction and the fly faction, they split to a point where they're like, we're going to handle the palm oil expansion, kind of like the Republicans and the Democrats. We're going to continue the palm oil expansion, but on this side, we're going to continue the slave trade with people who are going to sell slaves. We know we can't do it with the British no more, who was one of our major, our major customers. I'm going to read a little bit more, fam. I'm not going to read too much more to you, but I'm going to read just a little bit more. Dahomey's control of key coastal cities continued and made the era's crucial location in the European scramble for Africa. In 1878, the Kingdom of Dahomey agreed to the French. Listen, the Kingdom of Dahomey agreed to the French making the city of Cotonou into a protectorate, although taxation of the King of Dahomey was to remain in effect. In 1883, the French received similar concessions over Porto Novo, a traditional rival of Dahomey along the coast. In 1889, King Gale died and his son Benizi came to power and immediately became quite hostile to the French in negotiation. Benizi renounced the treaty. Listen, Benizi renounced the treaty with France, provided them with the city of Cotonou, and began raiding the possessions. The hostility hit a high point when Benizi began conducting slave raids in French protectorates along the coast, named Grand Popo. In 1891, that year, the French military decided that a military takeover was the only solution and placed General Alfred Amede Dawes in charge of the operation to commence in 1892. Now, the rest of the story basically goes on that the French conquered them and colonized their country. Anytime you open the door for the devil, you can't close it. And whatever devil you may want to connect that with the Christianity, Hindu, Buddhist, Muslim, Islamic, whatever devil you believe in or you believe exists, once you open the door in the devil, you can't close it. You allow people to come in and build slave trade buildings and constructions just for the simple commerce of people being property and being traded for weapons and other sorts of resources in order you to fight wars and conquer more land within your country, and then try to close the door on them and then try to destroy them within your own country. So now a more powerful military that you was once in business with came and conquered you and colonized your country. And that's why countries in West Africa like Senegal, Togo, and Benin speak French or Creole or something close to it. And when they come and colonize, when colonizers come to your country, this is what they do. The French began changing key aspects of administration and politics in the Kingdom of Dahomey. In 1899, the French instituted a new poll tax, which was highly unpopular, and Angola Obugo opposed the tax, causing serious political problems in the protectorate. As a result, on February 17, 1900, the French deposed Agoli Abu and ended the kingdom of the Dahomey. The French brought together many key members of the kingdoms as the chiefs of cantons. French Dahomey included the Kingdom of Dahomey, were Port Novo, Port Novo in the area to the north of loose tribe control. And it says Agoli Agobo remained exiled from 1900 until 1910 when the French administration decided to allow him to return to the area because of his key role in the Fon ancestor worship and ceremonies. He was not allowed to reside in Abomey or travel freely, but was allowed to visit Abomey to perform ceremonial functions during the annual customs by the French administration. You can go into how the French Dahomey administration remained over the era from 1900 to the 1960 when the country gained independence and took the name Republic of Dahomey. In 1975, the name of the country was changed from Republic of Dahomey to Benin. Okay, Republic of Dahomey to Benin. The King of Dahomey remains an important ceremonial position and continued through both French administration and independence. Since 2000, there has been a struggle over the position, with Agoli Abu III and Banazi holding rival claims to the throne. Until this day, because of their major part of the slave trade, they have been forever a dysfunctional empire. Even to this day, the modern day country as we know as Benin. So when you look at this film, family, just watch it as fiction. Do not watch this movie as nonfiction. As the trailer stated, that there has some true events, which in itself, I said originally, I was going to be contradicting myself, is false. The only true thing in the movie was the female soldiers. As it stated here, that Dahomey never had any reference of them trying to end the slave trade with the British, the Dutch, and the Portuguese. Now, of course, most movies are going to have some dramatized periods. They're going to have some inaccuracies to kind of dramatize the movie for people to watch it. But majority of the movie is 99% false. I mean, you got disrespect of the actresses and actors that played in this movie. Majority of them was English. You have Viola Davis, which is a Black American, who was co-starring with a South African actress. They were the two major actresses in this movie. All the supporting actors and actresses, most of them was English. And the one lady, Atim, she's from Uganda, but she has British citizenship, so they call her Ugandan British. So, family, when you watch this movie, if you watch this movie, I just wanted to point out a lot of the lies that are displayed in this movie. And I'm gonna go back to one more thing here that was written that I think is important. She said, she added, I'm a big believer that information is power. I'm a big believer that information is power. And I think that understanding issues surrounding slavery from the standpoint of African perspective is relevant. I have one question. Why isn't that when Black Americans go to these African countries, they don't offer us dual citizenship? Why don't they offer us dual citizenship? Are we not of your people? Because Ghana came out and apologized for the slave trade, that they played a major component. My family and I, we went to Ghana in February this year, and we went to the whole slave castle or we went into the slave dungeons. And we found out that this story has been repeated throughout the continent of Africa, almost the entire continent, throughout the entire continent. Because learning the history we learned in Ghana is that Ghana also was an empire. I don't know the traditional name that they had back then, but they were selling their captives into slavery, and their opposing enemies were selling their people into slavery. So when you go to Ancestry.com and you're mixed with all of these things, understand why you're mixed with all of these different people. Because your ancestors who were sold into slavery was raped by their own people, sold into slavery, raped by the Europeans, sold into slavery, raped by all these other groups. I looked at my Ancestry.com, family. I might pop that up here very quickly. If I can pop this up very quickly. Let me pop this up very quickly, so I can show you what I'm mixed with. Now, supposedly I'm majority Nigerian. I'm 22% Nigerian. But I'm also 8% Irish. And I showed a picture one time on here of my similarities to what's the UFC fighter name who Conor McGregor, how we have this long cylindrical face. And when I was looking at the people of Ghana, their heads and their facial are a little smaller in diameter, and mine is more cylindrical. That could be my 8% of being Irish. Let me get to my tree very quickly. Let me get to my DNA to show you the percentages that I am. Because I think that you guys should all go to Ancestry.com or one of these sites that kind of reference your DNA. Let me show you very quickly. And it's always updating and changing as they get more DNA inside their systems. Hold on. Here we go. Here we go. Nigeria. I'm 21% Nigeria. Mali was part of the slave trade as well. I'm 17% there. Ghana. I'm 16% Ghanaian and part of the Ivory Coast. Oh, look at this. Benin and Togo. This is why it should be important to you. Supposedly, I'm 11% Benin. Maybe I'm also part of Dahomey, or maybe I'm part of Oyo, or maybe I was just one of the descendants of the slaves that they sold into slavery back in the late 1800s. I'm 10% Cameroonian, Congo, and West Bantu people. 7% Scotland. So I'm first this was Irish, now it turned to Scottish. Now I'm 7% Scottish. Senegal, also a French-speaking country, 4%. Indigenous American North, okay, 2%. Southern Bantu people, 1%. Northern Philippines, 1%. Sweden and Denmark, 1%. Maybe I'm part Viking, I don't know. Northern Italy, 1%. And Germanic European. But family, I'm pretty sure that most of your DNA, especially if you're foundational Black American, is probably composed of these top four. Benin and Togo, Benin, the Dahomey Empire, Ghana, the Ashanti people, Mali. Forgot the, what they used to call Mali people? Was it Peru? No, not Peru. I forgot the traditional name of Mali. And then Nigeria. That's my DNA. And I'm 2% indigenous. So there you have it, family. So again, you go watch this movie. Just know that this movie, in my opinion, is 99% fiction and probably 1% truth. And that's just displaying the female warriors of the Agoji. That's pretty much it. I didn't get too riled up about it because I know how history is written by the victors. So you can also take that with a grain of salt. But other than that, family, hopefully you guys are watching some good football games.